Hey guys, it's Michael, and welcome to episode 2 of Behind the Album, the sequel series to Behind the Song, where we're looking into the story of an album that I feel is worth telling. And today we'll be looking into the history of Metallica's first album of the new millennium, Saint Anger. Before we get to the 2000s, however, we have to go back to the 80s. From when they formed in 1981, Metallica became known for their distinctive thrash metal sound, driven by technical and fast guitar and drum work, and lyrics about adolescent rage, death, drug addiction, mental illness, political unrest even. By a decade later in 1991, thanks to their seminal self-titled album, known as the Black Album, the San Francisco band was one of the biggest heavy metal acts in the world. So naturally, their fans were frothing at the mouth waiting for the follow-up to the Black Album. But when that album, titled Load, dropped in June of 1996, fans who were used to Metallica's thrash sound were suddenly surprised to hear a more 90s alternative sound combined with the band's signature thrash sound. That sound carried over to Metallica's follow-up, 1997's Reload. But since both those albums contained Metallica's familiar tentacle mastery, many fans didn't really voice concerns about them. They even seemed content with Metallica's new sound until the turn of the century. After trying to support Reload, Metallica laid low for a few years, only beginning work on their first album of the 2000s in 2002. Metallica's fans remained patient and waited for about another year for the band's next album to drop. When the album, titled Saint Anger, dropped on June 5th, 2003, Metallica's fans pounced on it like lions pouncing on antelopes, causing the album to debut at number 1 on the Billboard album charts, like Metallica's previous 3 albums had done before. In the immediate days after the release, however, Metallica fans around the world began expressing distaste at Metallica's new sound, which was unofficially dubbed the Saint Anger sound. While many critics liked Saint Anger, a few did not. Pitchfork's Brent DiCrescenzo in particular hated the album, criticizing its rather unfocused sound and lack of any technical guitar solos, one thing Metallica had become known for. DiCrescenzo especially hated drummer Lars Ulrich's horrendous drum sound on the album as well, which he likened to Ulrich playing a drum kit consisting of steel drums, aluminum toms, programmed double kicks, and a broken church bell. Ouch. DiCrescenzo's criticisms echoed the frustrations some fans had towards the Saint Anger sound. They were soon wondering what had happened to Metallica, one of the big 4 of pioneers of thrash metal, alongside Anthrax, Megadeth, and Slayer. How did they go from thrash to whatever the Saint Anger sound was? Well, to understand why Metallica experimented so drastically on Saint Anger, we have to go back and look at their history again. Remember, throughout the 80s, they pioneered the thrash metal sound. Starting with the Black Album, Metallica began experimenting. And would continue to do so throughout the 90s, as evidenced by Load and Reload. It looked like the band was going to ride that momentum into the new millennium, but the new millennium would start on a sour note for the band. First, in April of 2000, Lars Ulrich discovered that a demo of Metallica's song I Disappear, which they recorded for Mission Impossible, was circulating around the online music and file sharing site Napster without the band's approval. In Ulrich's eyes, this was theft that required legal action. So on behalf of the band, Ulrich filed a lawsuit against Napster for copyright infringement.
On April 14th, Metallica filed a lawsuit against Napster for basically encouraging people to steal and trade our music.
All of a sudden, we were just like anti-music fan because we were anti-Napster.
The story of that suit probably deserves a video of its own, but the short version is it was ultimately settled out of court, resulting in over 300,000 Napster users being banned from using the service. Ulrich would also later express regret over the suit in a 2009 interview, but that's another story. Getting back to Metallica's series of misfortunes, longtime bassist Jason Newsted quit the band in 2001. Newsted had joined the band when they needed him the most, after the death of former bassist Cliff Burton during the Master of Puppets tour in 1986.
No matter if this band goes for 20 more years, I'm always going to be the new guy no matter what.
He performed on all Metallica's studio releases from 1987 until 2001, when he abruptly left, citing the desire to play with his side project Echo Brain more.
I asked James straight up, dude, you can't be in a band with me if I do Echo Brain, right? He says yes. I said, then I have to go. And I am leaving the band.
He left the band. Period. He left the band.
Once again, Metallica was down to just 3 members: Ulrich, frontman James Hetfield, and guitarist Kirk Hammett. And Newsted's departure also fueled pre-existing tensions within the band, particularly between Ulrich and Hetfield. Although they had been tight since they formed Metallica in 1981, the two were seemingly at their wits' end by 2001, and that left Hammett desperately trying to keep the two from killing each other. The band was also being interviewed for a documentary chronicling the recording of Saint Anger, which meant they were under the microscope, or more to point, the camera, that was capturing every move they made and everything happening among them. While excited for the upcoming documentary, Metallica knew things would eventually go haywire at some point. And sure enough, in July of 2001, the ugliest moment in the band's history up to that point struck. One day in the studio, with the cameras rolling, tensions between Hetfield and Ulrich finally boiled over, as the two began arguing loudly in the control room.
It becomes.
You're just sitting here being a complete
I was straight up with you, and I told you I'm in a mood, and what have you been doing? Picking at me all night.
Come on, guys. We got better things to do.
While Hammett tried his best to defuse the situation, Hetfield declared he was done, and stormed out of the studio, slamming the door behind him on his way. A few days later, MTV announced Hetfield had entered rehab to undergo treatment for alcoholism and other undisclosed addictions.
My behavior on the road showed up at home, and my wife put an end to it. She said, "You're not a good influence on our children, and you're certainly not the person I'd like to be around." And she threw me out of the house. There was no other choice than to check in somewhere.
After that, many rock and metal fans began speculating if Metallica was going to split up after 20 years.
I was just left wondering, what's going on? Do we even have a band?
I'm prepared for the worst.
But among the chaos, signs of positivity began to emerge. Saint Anger producer Bob Rock decided to start playing bass, filling in for the departed Newsted and creating potential ideas in case Hetfield returned to work on the album. Rock, Ulrich, and Hammett were at least making the most of the situation they were in. Then in April 2002, many prayers were answered when Hetfield officially returned to Metallica after 9 months of rehab and soul-searching. Hiatus definitely worked, as Hetfield has remained clean and sober ever since. There was a catch, however. Hetfield would have to keep to a strict 12 noon to 4 p.m. work schedule as a way to continue resisting alcohol. But still, 4 hours a day isn't enough time to get much done, especially when making an album. Luckily, with the help of personal enhancement coach Phil Toll, Metallica quickly adjusted to the new schedule with flying colors.
The more we feel good about ourselves and each other, and the higher we ascend, the more challenging it will be.
I don't want to end up like Jason, okay? I don't want to be pushed away.
We were all off in our own little childish worlds, so we needed that help.
Before they knew it, they had the album pretty much done, and now they just needed one more thing: find a new bass player. That, however, was going to be tough. Metallica had already been through the exhausting task of auditioning new bass players when they hired Newsted in 1986. And when they did so, Metallica thought they would have a bassist until they disbanded. So when that proved not to be the case, they had no idea what they would do next. Nonetheless, they began holding auditions at their San Rafael, California studio dubbed HQ or Fort Metallica in February of 2003. Among the hopefuls were Marilyn Manson's Geordie White, better known as Twiggy Ramirez, Pepper Keenan of Corrosion of Conformity, Scott Reeder of Caius, Eric Avery of Jane's Addiction, and Robert Trujillo of Suicidal Tendencies and Ozzy Osbourne's solo band. The auditions were well documented for the documentary, and clearly showed varying level of skill among all the players, especially when they all tried their hand at Metallica's For Whom the Bell Tolls. Jamming in the studio with everyone, Hammett, Hetfield, and Ulrich all felt Trujillo was their guy.
He was the first guy of any of them that didn't look like he was struggling with it.
That's what I told Bob.
But do you know what I mean about, like, it, some of the other guys, it was sort of 10% over their capabilities or something like that, and you don't feel that with this guy at all. It's like the last 3 songs, like Sanitarium, Nothing Else Matters, and what was those?
Sad.
I mean, they were flawless.
Came back. I mean, that was for me when I noticed that you make us play better, man. You make the band sound so much better, and so solid.
How do you feel about that, man?
Oh, I feel awesome, man.
With Trujillo on board, Metallica put the final touches on Saint Anger and began the usual promotional work for the album, filming music videos, giving interviews, small shows around town, etc. The hiring of Trujillo, however, brought up a slight bit of camaraderie. As previously mentioned, Trujillo had been Ozzy Osbourne's bass player before he joined Metallica. Thus, after he left, Osbourne would have to find a new bassist. And he did, in the form of Jason Newsted. The media had a bit of a field day with the supposed Trujillo versus Newsted feud, even though both bassists said there was no such feud taking place. Regardless of all the gossip and the previous turmoil, Metallica released Saint Anger on June 5th, 2003. The album debuted at number 1 on the charts, selling 417,000 copies in its first week. Metallica was back with a vengeance, despite all the criticism around the album. Metallica then toured heavily for almost 2 years to support Saint Anger, building up their familiar enthusiasm with every stop around the world. And while many hardcore fans and critics thumbs down the album, Saint Anger went on to sell 2 million copies, being certified double platinum, and the album's title track even won Metallica the award for Best Metal Performance at the 2004 Grammys. So in the end, Metallica got the last laugh. Even though critics expressed their distaste, Metallica still had a hit which set them on a course for the new millennium. What we can learn from Metallica's experimentation on Saint Anger is rather simple. When you go through rough patches, it's going to be echoed in your work, be it in an office or in a recording studio. Anything can cause an artist to deviate from their usual sound. Tension was Metallica's main reason for the angry, bare-bones sound on Saint Anger. Their feud with Napster first caused their fans to turn on them for criticizing a then-upcoming digital music service. Look at how Spotify and Apple Music are prospering today. Then their bassist quit, and finally their frontman's demons drove him out of the band to seek treatment. After watching the resulting documentary titled Some Kind of Monster, even fans who criticize Saint Anger can at least understand why Metallica tried a heavier, stripped-down version on the album. Still, Metallica learned a valuable lesson. While experimentation is fun from time to time, it's always best to stick with what works. Since Saint Anger, Metallica have released 3 other albums: Death Magnetic in 2008, Hardwired to Self-Destruct in 2016, and 72 Seasons in 2023. All 3 albums showcased a return to Metallica's familiar, complex thrash metal sound, and were all big successes with critics and fans alike. It's clear Metallica has returned to their roots, and as long as that continues, they will reign supreme in the world of metal. So I hope you guys liked the video, or at least found it entertaining. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and turn on your notifications so you see the next behind the album, or behind the song. And until next time, rock on. Bye for now. So naturally their fans were frothing at the mouth by the time they released their follow. But when that album, oh dear. Pitchfork's Brent DiCascenzo, there's so much to ask for a critic to have a pronounceable name. The media had a bit of a field day with this supposed Hetfield versus, and as long as that continues, they will continue to, and as long as